This is a special episode of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. We are in the middle of An Aran for Frederick knit along. That's hashtag A4FKAL. We hope you will join us. Hello my friends, and welcome to a special edition of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. I'm Kathleen Dames, and today I'm going to be talking to you about An Aran for Frederick, because in my Ravelry group, Kathleen Dames Design, we are having An Aran for Frederick knit along, and we're using the hashtag A4FKAL. So you can participate as much or as little as you want. We're having a lot of fun. And today I wanted to talk a little bit, go over the charms of An Aran for Frederick and talk a little bit about techniques that might help you knitting your sweater. So first of all, I have a print copy. This is an old version of the pattern. It's still all the same good stuff, but there is a new layout. So if you've gotten the pattern recently, it looks a little different, a little more white space, uses less ink. Still the same lovely, efficient layout. Originally published in Jane Austen Knits, the very first issue. I have since released it as a standalone pattern, and it is perennially one of the most popular patterns that I have. There's just something about this pattern that people love. I think it's great. It's a unisex pattern. I wear mine, as you can see in the pattern photos. I wear mine sometimes with a silk skirt, usually just with jeans. It's very relaxed, sort of oversized fit. I think there's about 4 inches of ease. No waist shaping in mine, but if you look through the Ravelry projects pages, you will see people have done a lot of lovely adaptations with this pattern. And the great thing about the pattern is there is space for adaptations. So there are these side panels of seed stitch. You could change those and do them as stockinette. You could do ribbing to pull it into the sides. You could do waist shaping in here. I talk a lot about these kinds of changes that you can do in the Choices episode of season 3 of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. So if you're looking for ideas of how to make modifications, I would recommend starting there. If you have this vision of how you want to adapt the pattern. But definitely take a look at the projects pages, because lots of people have done some great adaptations, including waist shaping, dropping the front neck, adding ribbing at the collar, cuff, and hems. I chose not to. I really like that sort of this clean, modern look of just diving right into the cables. But that may not be for you. You may want something a little more traditional. And of course, seed stitch would be a great edging if you were going to do the seed stitch under the arms and at the sides. So it sort of ties everything together. And that's one of those things that I really appreciate in a knitted piece, in a pattern, is having those details match. The collar, cuff, and hems, button bands if there are. Like, it's really nice when they all go together. I just think it adds that final little cherry on top. And speaking of cherry on top, I ended this sweater with a roll collar. I wanted something really simple that wouldn't detract from all the cables. So it's really very simple roll neck at the top. And things to know about An Aran for Frederick: up at the top, the yoke. This one is what Elizabeth Zimmerman calls a hybrid yoke style. And it's sort of a little bit like a saddle shoulder in that we have these saddles that come up onto the shoulders. We do these decreases here that brings everything together, and we work some short rows to make those shoulders. And the great thing is that this is what, if you have the pattern, you know, is the ensign's braid. And so it's sort of like an epaulette, and it really adds that sort of military flair that Frederick Wentworth is known for. And I don't think I mentioned at the top of this that the inspiration for this pattern is Frederick Wentworth. He is the hero, the love interest of Jane Austen's Persuasion, her last novel, which ended as my favorite. So I sort of pulled different cables together that sort of told the story of Frederick Wentworth. As I said, the ensign's braid is on the sleeves and comes up onto the shoulders. The center panels, front and back, are called Celtic Flourish. And there's talk of Wentworth having an Irish air to him. So I thought that would be fun. And it's a really beautiful cable. It's pretty special. It's got this sort of closed ring aspects to it, where you build these curved bits from nothing. From one stitch, you turn them into 5 or 7, and then move them all around and back and decrease them down at the tops of these. And you still have these nice central twists as well. XOXO, of course, a romantic story like this, how could you not have Hugs and Kisses cables? And then, of course, we've got some twin waves here in these outer side panels as well, because, of course, he is a naval captain, and he's out on the ocean, and so why not have some twin waves? And the seed stitch for filler, as I said, under the sleeves and at the sides. And so the seed stitch panels are where you do the increases for the sleeves. This is a bottom up pullover. So we begin at the cuffs or the hem of the body and work our way up as 3 separate tubes. And then we bring everything together with this hybrid yoke. And we do different kinds of decreases, change the direction of things to shape those tubes into an actual sweater that fits your body, which is so much fun. If you haven't gotten to this part yet, the first time I did it, when I wrote the pattern, it was so exciting. I call it knitting Sudoku, because you've got these cables and you're keeping them going, and at the same time you're doing all these decreases, and it's just like you're keeping all these things going. It's really a great workout for your brain and, of course, your fingers and knitting needles. So that is the basic gist of An Aran for Frederick. It still is one of my favorite sweaters. It was knit in Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, which is a woolen spun yarn. It's lofty and light. There's lots of air in the yarn. So the yarn's a little delicate in the knitting, but it makes for this great lightweight sweater. Not lightweight, it's warm, but it's not heavy. Some sweaters that we wear, I'm wearing An Aran for Anne, which is the companion piece to Frederick. And it's in Louette Gems worsted, which is a worsted spun yarn. So it's smoother, there's more fiber in the strand of yarn, and it's a little heavier, a little denser. And you can see the different ways that cables pop out in this sort of tweedy, woolen, heathery yarn versus the smoother worsted spun yarn. And at the same time, the cables really pop on both. So that's something to keep in mind, is the kind of yarn you choose for this project will affect the outcome. So if you want that slightly blurry, soft, lightweight, definitely check out a yarn like Shelter. If you are looking for something maybe a little more refined, a little more in your face, a little more straightforward, you may want to check out something worsted spun. This is, as I said, Louette Gems. The Madeline Tosches and Malabrigos of the world are generally the same multiplies for the sort of worsted yarns. Rios would be Malabrigo, Tosh vintage or worsted. You want to be looking for multiple plies if this is the kind of effect you want. And you need to think about that. You are the boss of your knitting. As you know, if you've watched any episode of my podcast, I tend to say that a lot. You are the boss. And so you need to think about what you want out of your sweater, because you're going to spend a lot of time working on it. We've already been doing the KAL for about a month. But it's worth it. In the end, you get a sweater that fits you, that you love, that you're excited about. Somebody joined this morning in the Ravelry group, and she posted a picture of the yarn she's going to use, and it's this beautiful, bright, sharp grasshopper green, and I think it's going to look great. And I love that, this is a very traditional look for An Aran for Frederick, but again, I urge you to go and look at the projects pages, because so many people have done so many things. I've seen it in purple, I've seen it in, I don't think I've seen any stripes. But if you want to do striping, be sure to go and watch season 3 of the sweater, because while everyone was knitting basic cable, I was working on premium cable. That's why I'm pointing back here. I don't know if you can even see it, but premium cable I did in stripes of Spirit Trail Zalti, and some contrast cuff hems and a pocket. So this is again about the changes that you can make to your sweater, choices you can make. But stripes would be really fun too. There are all different ways to personalize your sweater. Okay, so what else do you want to know about for An Aran for Frederick? I know the one thing I promised I would talk about is cabling without a cable needle. And I definitely recommend going back to season 3, the episode, I think it's just called The Cable. And that shows you the basics of cabling without a cable needle. But the one thing that I don't talk about in that episode, because the cables I'm doing are knit over knit crosses, is how to work a knit over purl cross. And I have a swatch I'm working on here for a future project. Let's see, this is the right side out. And it's sort of like a hat. And that's a great way to do a swatch, is to cast on about half the number of stitches for the body you need. And let's say you're knitting the 40-inch size. So you'd be casting on 20 inches worth of stitches, and that's about right for a hat. If you're doing a bigger size, if you have a fuller bust, consider that you are making a cowl. And so, you know, if you're doing the 52-inch, that's a 26-inch circumference for a swatch. That's a perfect size for a cowl. Nice and big and cozy. You can almost sort of pull it down a little on your shoulders. But it's a great way to make sure that you're getting close to gauge. So I am not right at the spot where I would be doing a cable, but I can still explain to you what's going to happen, just like cabling without a cable needle on, just like cabling without a cable needle for basic cable, where we are crossing knits over knits. If you are crossing knits over purls, the only thing you really need to keep in mind is that you have to put the yarn in the proper position for your cable, whether it's at the back or the front, depending on the stitch you're doing next. But you don't move it until you've slipped your stitches. So I'll do a 2/2 cable here, and I'm going to cross the knit stitches in the front, and that's generally how it works if you're doing knits over purls. Keep in mind that the purl stitches go to the back of the work when you're looking at the right side. So I'm going to do 2, slip those onto my needle, and then, okay, I've got those slipped. I bring the yarn around behind those stitches, bring it to the front so that I can purl those next 2 stitches, okay? And then you have to bring the yarn back again before you do your swap. Okay, so now I have slipped the needle out, move those stitches back over, and now I can knit the front cable crossing. And then those 2 stitches, the first 2 stitches are purls. The yarn, the crosses, the twists, the working yarn always goes to the back. You don't want a strand in front of your stitches. And if you look at the back of your stitches after a cross, you will see that the yarn is moving around back there. But we don't see that on the front, we just see the cross. So that's the only special thing you need to keep in mind when you are cabling without a cable needle and you're working cables like Celtic Flourish, like Twin Waves and the Ensign's Braid, is that you are crossing knit stitches over purl stitches, and it's always over. It's very, very rare that you would have the purl stitches come in front of the knit stitches. So you just need to keep in mind where you are in your knitting and look at it and realize, okay, I'm bringing this cable in. So I slip the knit stitches to the right hand needle. I make sure the yarn's has been in back, bring it to the front, purl those stitches, so now they're going to end up over here, and then do the slips, sliding the needle out and putting it back in the right spot so you can then knit these stitches. But before you do that, you make sure to move the working yarn to the back so that you can knit. When you are crossing, when you are doing a back cross essentially, or a right cross over here, you are going to slip those stitches, because you're going to slip 2 stitches that are purl to your needle, keeping the yarn in back. Knit the next 2 stitches to bring them over, and then you are going to slip the needles out and back in so that you can work those purl stitches that have been waiting. Then you bring your yarn to the front. So the yarn always needs to stay behind your knit stitches. So that's really, I'm explaining it multiple times because it is the crux of the matter. But you always want to make sure that right before you work a stitch, you move the yarn to its proper spot, whether it should be at the front of the work for a purl or back of the work for a knit. So I hope that makes sense. If it does not, please ask more questions. I can do a close-up, but I hope that really makes sense. And I think I've done a video of cabling out a cable needle before I started the podcast. So you can go back and look in my video list and see those as well. So if you are working on An Aran for Frederick, I hope you're enjoying the pattern. I hope you're mastering all those cables so that when you do get up to the yoke, you really understand them. And that's the great thing about working this bottom up, is that you get comfortable with the cables, you get used to their rhythms, and then when you're doing all this other stuff, you know those cables already. And so you can do the cables, keep track of where they are, because you can read your knitting by that point. You've done the central Celtic flourish at least like 3 or 4 times, because it's a big cable. But you know what's going on and you understand it, and you can start doing that shaping to bring everything together, and you get these nice lines of decreases that actually these are the short rows that you do back and forth on the shoulder, but you have decreases in here. Do know that when you run out of stitches to be able to work a cable, just work those stitches in the proper flavor. So if you've been working the twin waves, most of those stitches are going to become purl stitches. They're going to become the background. And so that's just to keep in mind as you are eating away at those stitches to shape the fabric up onto your shoulders, that you will run out of stitches to be able to work some of the cables. It's just the way it is. But you do get to keep this ensign's braid riding up onto the shoulder. It makes this beautiful epaulette, and you'll work it back and forth. And that's something to be aware, is that eventually we've been working the cables in the round, which is so nice because you're always looking at your work and you can always see what's going on. But for the shoulders, for these epaulettes, you are going to work back and forth just for a little while. It's not too long, but do be aware that you want to make sure that you are crossing the cables on the right side of the work and knitting and purling your way back, the opposite of what it was before. So if it's purl on the right side, you knit on the wrong side and you purl the cable stitches. By then it should be pretty obvious what's happening. And then the only other thing to be aware of is that because of this hybrid yoke, these cables, these panels come in and form the shoulders, and then you're going to go back and you're going to raise the back of the neck, because otherwise you would sort of end here. So the thing is, on the smaller sizes, you can't do, hello George, okay, just a minute. All right, okay, sorry, that will be cut out. So on the smaller sizes, you will not be able to do these outer stitches of the Celtic flourish. And that's okay. You'll see they get eaten right there, depending on your size. And so then you'll just continue that center inner cable up top here. It's spelled out in the pattern, I promise, but I know that that's one of those sticking points. So I think that's everything for today. If you have any questions, of course, always ask me. Ravelry forum is the best place to do that, because there are other people in the forum who might be able to answer the question before I can get to it. And then the answer is there for everybody. If you ask in the forum, ask in the KAL thread. But if you are on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, as you're working along, tag me at Kathleen Dames. Use the hashtag A4FKAL, and we can all admire your progress on your beautiful sweater. I can't wait to see everybody's. As you can see, I have changed my clothes because it's the next day, and as I was editing the video, I realized that I got cut off before I got to say my final bit. So I'm back. I'm wearing Southerton today instead of An Aran for Anne. It's another Jane Austen inspired pattern. But more to the point, the reason I started this knit along is that I wanted to thank the people who joined me in the Stronger Together hashtag, who took advantage of that hashtag. I gave away 5,000 patterns in November because I wanted to put something really good out into the world and bring pleasure to lots of people. And what I didn't realize when I did that is how much joy it brought to me to get to know a bunch of new people, to share what I do with a lot of people, and to hear back from them how excited they were and how they were planning to go out and make the world a better place. So I hope if you are part of that movement that you are working to make the world a better place, and I appreciate you being here. If you haven't signed up for my newsletter, be sure to do that so that you don't miss any other information. I don't always have time to record a podcast. I often will just send out a quick email, the newsletter, to let people know what's going on. So there are multiple ways to keep track of me, and the newsletter is a nice quick one. Otherwise, be sure to follow along on Instagram, join me over my Ravelry forum. I'm in all those sorts of good places, and I'd love to know more about you and what you're working on. So, A for FKAL, tag your photos with that, talk about it in the Ravelry forum, keep knitting, ask me questions. I'll do another episode if I have questions that people would like answered about An Aran for Frederick. If you have come here through the Stronger Together hashtag and you're not working on An Aran for Frederick, you can also ask your questions. I'm happy to expand the scope of what I'm talking about a little beyond Frederick. Much as I love this pattern, and it does cover a lot of sort of the general knitting techniques that I think really make sweater knitting as fun and successful as it can be. There are other techniques that are covered in other patterns. I'm happy to talk about those too. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for putting up with my, what seems to you to be a quick change, and to me is really an, oh dear, I completely missed the end of the episode recording yesterday. Technical issues aside, I'm really grateful that you're here, and I hope you have a great day and happy knitting. Mwah. Bye. This has been The Sweater with Kathleen Dames, a very special episode on An Aran for Frederick Knit Along, hashtag A4FKAL. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to Jane Austen Knits and Interweave Knits for originally publishing An Aran for Frederick, to Brooklyn Tweed for the gorgeous shelter yarn, and to you for being here and being a part of The Sweater with Kathleen Dames. If you have questions or comments, be sure to visit the Ravelry forums. And if you want to share your progress on your sweater, be sure to use the hashtag A4FKAL and tag me at Kathleen Dames on Instagram. To make me feel that the world isn't such a challenging place, that we are all in this together and we're going to work to make the world a better place. So if you got a copy of this pattern for free, thank you, thank you. Be sure to go out, put more good into the world. If you like, sign up. And if you haven't, sign up for my Ravelry. Excuse